Ok.
Hein? Ok. We'll be ready in 1 minute.
It's an interesting thing. Most successful. Time is it?
אתה לא מחבר את זה מה?
זה לא קולט אותו.
לא קולט את המחשב?
המחשב לא קולט את הכבל כמו שצריך.
Excuse me.
That's all the Bronx.
Recording, okay.
Okay.
Okay, Rabbi Ron.
Again, Boker Tov, everyone. Very good Erev Shabbat. This week's Parsha, there is a posuk that reverberates throughout all of Jewish life and Jewish history. All the psukim do, but this one has like a particular resonance. Moshe says you will come to a state of being that you will ask, Eichel Yavdu Hagoyim O'Ele Es Eloheihem. Oh, how do these nations worship their gods? V'esechein Gamoni. And we will also follow in their ways, and we'll do the same. So there's a difference of opinion amongst the Meforshim. What does this refer to? So Rashi, quoting the Gemara, the words in Sanhedrin and in Avodah Zorah, Rashi says that the worship of foreign gods is in the way that those gods were worshipped. For instance, there was a god called Markulis. Markulis was some say it was Mercury, the Greek god. And the way to worship it was that they took stones and they threw it at the statue. The Muslims have that today. In Mecca, that they throw stones at the Kaaba. It's a vestige of paganism. So, if the Jews throw stones, so then they violate Avodah Zorah. What if they don't throw stones? What if they just bow down to it? They wash it the way the Buddhists do to Buddha. So from the Gemara, and for what Rashi quotes, it seems that this is not the law that applies to them. The violation that applies to them is that if you do the service that is ordinarily done to worship this idol. Rashi then quotes the Gemara that that's not necessarily so. That even if you bow down to Markulis, you don't throw stones. Or you don't bring an animal sacrifice. Or you don't wash the idol. But you bow down to it. So that's also a violation. But that violation is because of the posuk, lo se'odei, don't worship it. But here we have a concept that other Meforshim disagree with Rashi completely. They say the Gemara doesn't mean that. Any form of honor or service given in the name of the idol is avodah zarah. V'shema Elohim acherim lo yishoma al picho. You can't even say the names. Now the Rambam holds that the central idea of the mitzvot was to distance us from avodah zarah. In other words, avodah zarah, it was and is such a strong attraction that without the mitzvot, we would not be able to withstand it. And avodah zarah appears in all forms. There's plenty of avodah zarah in society today. What takes primacy, priority? So the Torah says, this is an extension of this pasuk. Eicho yavdu hagoyim o'eles Elohim is a question. I don't want to know the details as to how they worship avodah zarah. I want to know how is it possible that they should worship avodah zarah? Can it be that 50 million Frenchmen are wrong? Can it be that the whole world is nuts and not, and you got a handful of people that say no? And because people find it hard to be a minority, and a very small minority, and a very despised minority. So therefore, so we will follow the majority. So Marxism is an avodah zarah, no question. Other money is an avodah zarah. What's your priority in life? You know, the famous comedian Jack Benny of the radio and later of television. So he had the famous, he was always portrayed as a miser. And so there's a mugger that comes up to him, puts a gun in his head and says, your money or your life. And he has a very long pause. And then the mugger said, did you hear what I said? Your money or your life? And then he replies, I'm thinking. So that's an avodah zarah. So if the whole world worships these avodah gamoni, we will also do it like this. And it's very hard to resist it. And that is basically the struggle that Moshe Rabbeinu foretells the Jewish people that they will have to be involved in throughout their history. They will have to be the naysayers. They'll have to be the ones that say no. And it's very hard, as we are witness. So there's a din in the Gemara that there are things that are called Darkei or emori. It's not worship of avodah zarah per se, but it's the behavior of the pagans. And that also, to keep us away from avodah zarah, we are told to stay away from the habits and the ways of the pagans. Because if you act like a pagan, eventually you are a pagan. So throughout Jewish history, there's a question of what is Darkei emori? How far does it go? And there are extreme examples that last until our time. In the 18th and 19th century, when reform was very powerful, especially in Germany. So reform had an influence upon the Orthodox as well. So the Orthodox rabbis, I think maybe in England even till today, they wore a special robe, they wore clerical garb. They wore the little talit. In Eastern Europe, that was not accepted because they said that was Darkei or emori. In Germany, every Reformed temple had music, usually an organ. Which is a direct copy of the church that always had organ music. So naturally that was forbidden because not only because of Darkei, if we get rid of the problem of Shabbat, but that was forbidden because of Darkei emori. However, in Germany, at the Orthodox synagogue always had a choir. Naturally a male choir. But it had a choir. Till today in the synagogues that are of German extraction, they have a choir. In Eastern Europe, that was called a chor shul, synagogue that had a choir. You know, the chassidim would cross the street, not to walk by the shul. Even though there was no musical instrument. And even though it perhaps enhanced the service, but it was not accepted because of the fact that that was how the non-Jews worshipped. And that is implied in the Pasuk, Eicho Yavdu Hagoyim Oheles Elohim, Vesachein Gamoni. We're not copying them. What if we did something first and then the Goyim did it? Do we have to give it up? How far does this go? So we're talking here basically about custom and not about halacha. Whatever is in halacha that we follow. We don't care what the Goyim say. But in custom. So a famous example of that is that the custom of the Jewish people was, still is in most synagogues, that for the holiday of Shavuot, the synagogue is decorated with greenery, with flowers, as a reminder of the decoration of nature at the giving of the Torah on Sinai. The Gaon of Vilna in the 1700s forbade the custom because he said that that's how the church celebrates, especially Easter time, etc. Flowers. But we don't have flowers in Shul. Now that custom was not, so those who discussed the matter with him said, but we were first. Our custom is older than theirs. So he said that a custom, even if it's older, if it is adopted by the non-Jewish world as somehow attached to the service, prayers, then we will abandon our custom. Now, most of the Jewish world does not agree with him. I always said that the compromise is that the flowers, like in our shul, are made of plastic. But we see how far this idea of Darkei emori goes. And therefore it applies to a wide range of situations. The Rambam says that's part of what we see every day in the problems that we have. The Jew is not allowed to have superstitions. There are no lucky numbers, there are no lucky days. No such thing as lucky. And there are other, if you look in the Tosefta, in Avodah Zorah and in Sanhedrin, all of the superstitions that exist in the world are listed there. Black cats, walking under a ladder, lucky and unlucky numbers, all of them. Rambam says they're all Avodah Zorah. Because the Rambam is the supreme rationalist. He says there's no room for superstitions. There's no room for any of these beliefs. However, what happened was that the Jewish people were in exile for 1800 years. If you live in a town that's 50% Polish Catholics, eventually the behavior of the Polish Catholics has an influence upon it. It was part of your way of life as well. So, for instance, the idea of welcoming someone with bread and salt, which was observed in many, many Jewish communities. I remember it in Chicago yet. The guest came. That's a non-Jewish custom. Nevertheless, it became part of Jewish life. It became Darkei emori, but no one prevented it. What's very popular today are red strings. Red strings is a pagan custom. Today, if I tell you to ignore red strings, then I can lose my license. Because that's the influence of the non-Jewish world. In Germany, and I think in England today still, because England basically adopted many Germanic customs. The rabbis wear a special robe, clerical robe. That Darkei emori. The only thing that we find by Talmud Chacham is that they wore a special turban. They wore a special hat. That's why hats are so important to us. But we don't find anybody saying that rabbis should wear special robes. Nevertheless, that became a source of contention. I remember that when I became a rabbi in Miami Beach, so the founders of our then very small synagogue were of Germanic extraction. And they insisted that the rabbi on Shabbos wear these clerical robes, a long black robe with a small, with a scarf, tallis, etc. It was against my nature. So after a few months, I stopped. Because I figured they had better reasons to fire me than that. So they came to me and they said, but yeah, it's our custom, you know. So I made a compromise with them that I used to wear for a period of time formal dress on Shabbos. Cut away the whole shebang like I'm going to a wedding. But I outgrew that too. So, but the question is that now in a time when reform was raging, somehow they felt that that would be a buttress against reform. Our rabbi also has a robe. We also have dignified services. They tell the old bad joke about Napoleon Bonaparte. that when the French army conquered Poland, so he was once, he came to a town and he went to the synagogue, he went to the shtetl, and he saw what was going on there. And he said, you know, those Jews are clever. They have separate services for the insane. So when you say about decorum in the synagogue, so there's a halacha. But for many synagogues that don't have a decorum, it began because they don't want to imitate the goyim. So this posuk, Echo Yavdu Agoyim Oeles Eloheim, has great meaning to us. It extends to all sorts of things. It's a part of our DNA. How to avoid. I remember in Chicago, when I was young growing up, so the conservative and reform used to have Friday night services. That was the main, I think it still is, I don't know what it's there. So in order to counter it, the Orthodox used to make an oneg Shabbat after the meal Friday night. And everybody came back to shul, and there was a drosha, and there was what to eat, and there was camaraderie, etc. In our time, that really is no longer present. But it was felt that somehow you had to do something. So one should always be aware of these things. Don't live, again, I mentioned, you don't live 800 years in Poland without being a little Polish. Moshe warned against that. So in the Meforshim, there are differences of opinion, how far to stretch this. And whether or not it's flexible. When we can change it as the situations change. The idea by Chassidim of having a tish Friday night after you've been home and when you come back to eat with the Rebbe is also a reflection of trying somehow to combat what the non-Jewish world or what the Reform do. Of course, there are limits. My father-in-law told me that he knew a rabbi in Lithuania, old rabbi, and a member of the congregation went to the United States. And he came back, so he brought as a gift to the synagogue a clock. And they put the clock up in the synagogue. And the rabbi came in and he looked at the clock. He said, I see reform is here already. So you have to be able to draw the line. Be able to see what is or isn't. The Rambam's idea, with this I'll conclude, the Rambam's idea is whatever does not work is Darkei or emori. In other words, it has to be scientifically, rationally correct. So you have the famous piece in the Rambam in the parish on Mishnayos, the Psochim, fifth parak, Rambam has a long, usually what he has in the parish on Mishnayos are very short comments. This is a very long paragraph. The Gemara says that Chizkiyahu HaMelech, the king of Yehuda, took the Sefer HaRafuos. There was a book called the Book of Medicine of Healing. And he took it out of circulation so that people could not get it anymore. So Rashi says that the reason that Shlomo HaMelech did that was because of the fact that people no longer prayed to God. You don't pray to God, you take the antibiotic. You don't need God because the antibiotic will cure you. So in order to prevent that understanding of the matter, he took out of circulation the Sefer HaRafuos, the book that had all of these medicines. The Rambam attacks this idea very strongly. He says if the Sefer HaRafuos worked, if an antibiotic helps, you have no right to take it away. Anything that heals, you have to use. So he says the Sefer HaRafuos was quack medicine. It was junk. And it didn't work. And therefore he said it was attached to Avodah Zorah, which is quack. And therefore he took it out of circulation. And he makes an oblique reference to Rashi. In the Rambam, Rashi is never mentioned. We don't know whether he saw, I don't know. But he said, I heard that a wise man said the other pshat, and it cannot be correct. So what works, works. But if there's no rational explanation, if there's no logic to it, so then that really crosses the line and should be ignored. Our world is a mixture of many, many things. There are many, many ideas. But this is a posuk that certainly applies to us. And we should try and be true to ourselves, and to halacha, and not to get hung up on all sorts of magical ideas that may not really have any value. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And thank you for coming. Stay well.
מה זה violation?
I'm only in Israel for a couple of days, but I couldn't miss it here. I had to come for that.
זה לא בעלים.
Would it be possible to take a quick picture?
הרב יודע איך זה מיגור הרב. מאוד דחוף ברחוב הר"ן, עוברים ברחוב אוסישקין, 18 זישקין, הרב יודע כבר, הוא יודע, אוקיי? אבל כשאתה יוצא, רק תזכור את הדלת.
לסגור. אוקיי.
כל טוב.
תודה רבה.
תודה שלום.
between us and them. Well, I'm not going to care if how to the Zoom because I did not too much remember. Baruch Hashem,